Hello, and welcome to the Indomitable podcast, where we talk about human conversations and overcoming adversity. I am your host, Di Cerullo, and today I am joined by my friend Ashley Nance. Ashley, thank you so much for joining me here today. I am so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thanks. I'm excited too.
So, I know we've known each other sort of back and forth a little bit on LinkedIn, the way you do when you're building sort of your network and all of that. Why don't you tell everybody listening a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So LinkedIn professionally, I've been marketing strategy for a little over 10 years and just now starting my own agency, which is exciting. And my focus is on serving and also employing neurodiverse individuals like myself and my family.
Awesome.
My husband and I both have autism and ADHD. He's formally diagnosed. I'm self-diagnosed. I have 5 kids, and there's a mix in there. Just
Yeah,
spaghetti sprinkles, and it's great. And
absolutely.
it's an
Yes,
exciting time.
absolutely. For those of you who haven't heard me say it thousands and thousands of times yet, I am ADHD. I have known I was ADHD all of my life because, as you know, I grew up in foster care, and one of the things that they do for you in foster care is test, test, test. So I have known I was ADHD since basically the dawn of my life. I've known that before I had like a formal consciousness about myself. So my life going through the world was very different because I understood what was different about me, even though I didn't understand how it impacted me. So, what I'm always curious about with those of our community who are sort of self-diagnosed, when did you start to realize something maybe different was going on with you? We have a tendency to blame ourselves, right? And then, of course, our school experience and sometimes our parental figures have a tendency to help us along that journey of blaming ourselves and rejecting ourselves. When did you sort of start to realize that something else might be going on?
It's an excellent question. I love that. My sister was diagnosed when she was 9, and she's very close to my age.
Mm.
And she would be totally fine with my saying that. In fact, she wrote a book about her, and she thinks it's great. So,
Yes. Yes.
um, but she is very different from me. She is laid back, calm, low energy, forgiving,
Mm.
gives people the benefit of the doubt,
Mm.
gives herself space to roll. And I uptight, judgmental, like
Yes.
hard lines. You follow the rules. You figure
Absolutely.
out what you're expected to do, and you do it better than they think you should. That was me.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so growing up, not realizing I'm on the same spectrum,
Yeah.
I'm trying to make her into me, trying to
Ooh.
like, like do
Mm-hmm.
this differently. Oh, don't suck your thumb. Oh, don't twirl your hair. Like all this stuff. That was me. Like all these people that you look like, yeah, so and so was so critical of how I just was in my life. I'm like, no. But
Mm.
thankfully she forgave me and was like, I
Mm.
love you, you're great. And I'm like, I don't deserve that, but thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my journey was one of figuring out that I don't need to criticize others or
Right.
myself to death in order to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I still remember it wasn't long enough ago that the first time I caught myself praying to be that I'd be able to be a good girl and just stopping myself and be like, I am.
Mm.
I
Yes.
am. I know that's not
Yes.
something to aspire to. It's already
No.
there.
You all, yeah.
Um, and that was a process, and it was many people and a lot of prayer and self analysis to realize that there's good in me, and yes, healthy striving is good, but mostly how my autism manifest was just like trying to be perfect in every way and thinking that it was possible.
Right.
And
Right.
so what finally led me to self-diagnosing was actually watching a video on pathological demand avoidance put
Mm-hmm.
on by an autistic woman who I
Mm-hmm.
deeply respect. And my husband and I watched it, and then my eyes just popped out of my head. And I stopped it and I started it over, and I watched it with my husband, and we both looked at each other like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super
Yeah.
social, always on a show, comfortable
Mm-hmm.
on stage. it just made so much sense. And all the things that
Absolutely.
I thought disqualified me from being autistic when I had considered it as a possibility before,
Yes.
especially when my husband was diagnosed. I was like, am I on the
Yeah.
spectrum too? But I'm like, no, I can't
Yeah.
be because I can look people in the eye. I'm
Oh
social.
God. Yes, I
I like
do.
people. I public
Oh.
speak. I'm comfortable on stage. I can
Mhm.
possibly be. But
Yeah.
turns out that was right in there with everything else.
Ah, man, that is the worst. If I could go back and change anything about like the lives we have lived so far, it's like the people who were holding the mic about what autism, ADHD, and sort of all of the neurodiversity umbrella, if all of those people just like stopped, you know what I mean? If I could just erase all of that, it would just change so much about who people would become.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I get that feedback all the time. Like I'll be giving a talk, for example, about neurodiversity, and I always line it up in the same way. So I definitely go through all of the tendencies, all of the ranges on those tendencies, the mosaic, the behaviors, and then I'll watch as people's faces sort of have awakenings of a moment, right? And then that's why I have to end everything with Q&A, right? So like I will watch the dawning of awareness happen over people's faces as they realize in that moment this is what has been happening all of this time. And it's profound in its sadness, right? Because
Yeah.
you're just like, oh my god, am I the first person to say this to you? Am I the first person to like introduce you to the concept of the fact that like you have been fine this entire time? You
Yes.
are not a weird horse, you are a normal zebra, right? Like it's just, I mean, like that's
Yes.
always the thing with like late diagnosis trauma. I'm always so inspired by folks who have definitely just been doing that self-worth. That's crazy. So you started seeing it. First of all, you knew your husband had been diagnosed, and then you started looking at yourself. That's incredible. Not everybody has that like self-awareness to like look at I think everybody thinks that they do, but that has not
Right.
always been my experience, you know. But
Right.
definitely we all do.
It's been a piece, like piece by piece.
Yeah.
One thing, like one piece was I spent some time with an aunt that I hadn't really had a lot of contact with growing up, and I realized she was just like my sister, but
Mm.
didn't have autism. I was like,
Mm.
wait. And
Oh
then I
yeah.
started like pull that apart. My sister's
Yeah.
personality versus the the fact she's
Yes.
autistic, and like and trying to suss that out and
Yes.
hmm.
Yeah, we saw that a lot in the pandemic too. A lot of kids who were suddenly being homeschooled by parents who had
Yes.
never had to deal with that before suddenly started getting, "Oh no, wait, this
Yeah.
is this is something serious." And they would go get diagnosed and then next thing you know, you'd have parents being like, "Wait a minute, that's not autism, that's not ADHD. I do that." And
Right.
then the doctors be like, "Well, we have some, let's talk
You
about
can do
that,
this again.
because like exactly. I think I'm always so surprised when that's sort of the order of it, but that's incredibly common. You see it
Yes.
in it's so much easier to see it in others than it is to look at ourselves.
Very true.
um yeah, no, that's completely fascinating. I'm also kind of curious about like the way that it manifested in you, that sort of need for perfection, that need
Hmm.
to make your sister perfect. I wonder, sort of that's a trauma response that we develop.
Hmm.
So we strive to be perfect because we are so afraid of the rejection. Was that
Yes.
your experience, or is that just
It was to an extent, and I look at my siblings and I know that we had the same parents and didn't have the same responses. And I
of
think a lot
course.
of why it was so hard on me is because I was the oldest.
Yes.
Um,
Oldest daughter syndrome.
oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm the guinea pig. I'm
Yeah.
also put in charge.
Yep.
And I got it into my head extremely early on that it was my job to make my mom happy,
Of
not
course.
realizing that it wasn't possible. She never asked me to do that. Like, she's never like, my life would be better if you would be. Never, ever was that. But
Right.
I just, somehow, I was like, I'll get more time with her if I do what I'm asked to do. And if I never lie, then they'll trust me and like all this stuff. And so, like,
Hmm.
the precision was like the key that I saw to having more time with my mom, more acceptance, more freedom to be me. And whenever I messed up, and she told me something that I needed to do better, I thought that if I met that requirement, then she would be happier or that I
Mm,
would be more accepted or whatever. Of course, as a
yeah.
kid, you don't have any idea what you're thinking.
Right.
But just, and my memory was exceptional and it was better than my
Yeah.
parents.
Of course. Yeah.
And still, like, to this day, I can remember things they don't remember about
Of
that
course.
same time period.
Well, I mean, don't
I know.
remember and don't remember are kind of two different things, right? So,
Yep.
like, don't remember when we're scorekeeping because of hurts is one thing that we remember
Yes.
obsessively. We lie awake at night remembering it, right?
Yes.
Don't remember when you're a parent is a little bit more like, I don't mean to,
Yeah,
say
sure.
anything. It just very much feels as if like maybe we don't want to think about
Right.
anything along those lines, like it's sort
And
of
my mom has even said, like, she can't remember anything about, like, my childhood pretty much, with, like, a
mm,
couple exceptions because she had her own trauma she was dealing with from being a kid
mm,
in a psychologically abusive space.
that is such
So
a
she
common
was
story.
so, like, and she rocked it. She did not pass any of that on, but it
Yeah.
was by creating kind of an emotional wall that
Yes.
she prevented that from being passed to
Prevented
the
that from being
next side.
passed.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we see that a lot when we're not trying to pass down our trauma. I think a lot of times what people do is they sort of keep themselves closed off emotionally so that they
Mhm.
aren't having those outbursts the way that
Mhm.
potentially their parents before them did. And it's just such an interesting like lineage because yes, you have not passed on that same abuse, but you
Yeah.
have definitely passed on your trauma by
Mhm.
way of your behavior, right? So
Right.
like if you're avoiding something without telling your child why you're avoiding it, they are creating that story in their mind, right? So
Mhm.
they are already sort of and if you are constantly making sure that your parents are not having emotional reactions,
Yes.
that is still you being traumatized. That is
Right.
still you learning that lesson that you need to be perfect in order to be accepted. And I'm always my trauma is very specific and outgoing for and so
Mhm.
everybody's always like, well, not like you die, and I'm like, a little like me, a little bit like me, friends, right? So
Right.
I'm always sort of saying that to people. So I apologize. I don't mean to get into your trauma here.
Not at all,
Um,
no. Well,
yeah.
one of the key moments for me in my healing was having a therapist who I feel like it was helpful that she knew me and my mother, so she wasn't,
Ooh,
like,
yeah.
taking sides,
Right.
but she said that, like, basically, it's possible for my mother to have done the best she could and to have it still not be okay.
Of
So,
course.
the
Yes.
fact that I didn't get what I needed, still not fine.
Still not fine.
And
Right. Yeah.
period.
Oh,
It's not.
absolutely.
And that, like, because I thought I had forgiven her for what I missed out on, but what I
Mm.
realized in that moment is that I just excused it and pushed it out of my mind and made excuses for it. But I had
Mm.
to feel it and have
Yeah.
it be wrong
Yeah.
in order for me to fully forgive that and let it
Yes.
go. And
Yes.
and from there, I'm like, well, if I can't figure out how to get this person in my life to have a mothering role in my life, then
Yes.
who's it going to be? And a lot of my life was trying to find kind of a substitute or fixing her so that she could do that for me. And when
Mm-hmm.
I finally like was in the realized I needed to just completely give that up.
Yes.
I was like, well, God can do that for me.
Mm.
And so and it's I grew up calling God Father, but I
Mm.
just explained to him in prayer. I was like, right now I need to call you mommy
Yeah.
because I have some
Yeah.
whining I need to get done and
Yes.
I need my mommy to do it too. So
Yes.
was that cool? Cool. Okay. All right. Cool.
Yes.
Was able to be
Absolutely.
like, it's there and like throw a little fit. I was like, okay, I feel better.
I mean, the only thing that heals is truth. So, like, we can avoid it, we can not talk about it, we can pretend we're better from it, but it just stays there getting worse. Like, people are always like, oh, time heals all wounds. That is BS. Time does
Mhm.
not heal all wounds by itself. That is absolute crap. Whoever said that was trying to get away with not taking accountability. Like, that was some stuff, right? Like, no, time doesn't heal anything by itself. Truth heals wounds. And that is about you having to look at it and admit what it is. And one of the most fascinating things that you see out in the world is sort of how people are dealing with their parent trauma, right? So for example, when Queen Elizabeth died, you saw people react in sort of one of two ways. And the people who had been really used to having an absent mother, having to apologize for that, having to explain that away, or from absent to abusive, from neglect to full on abusive, those were the people saying, oh, well, we shouldn't talk badly about her or discuss any of the things that were very questionable about her behavior. And then on the other side, we had people who had kind of either had parents that weren't like that or had done the work or any of those things, saying, no, it is okay to talk about both sides of that. It is okay to appreciate who she was and what she might have been through, and say that the stuff that she didn't fix in her lifetime was something that she was responsible for. But the most fascinating thing was those people who were used to apologizing for their own parents or apologizing for that behavior were very keen to continue doing that. And I've just felt like you see it so clearly out in the world, the way that people respond to parent figures based on who they were, based on who their parents were. They even go on to marry, or make relationships with those people that they needed. And I'm fascinated by the human experience in that way. Sorry to go off on a tangent. It's
That's
the
fantastic. No, it's really good point because we're seeing it play
Of
on over
course.
and over
All over
regardless.
the place, just over and over. Exactly. Just over and over and over again. So, anyways, I appreciate that you are willing to do the work. How does your parenting, how you parent being impacted by the fact that you are now aware that you're autistic?
I think it's really validating because I
Mm,
had already started using headphones because I already
mm,
knew I had sensory issues.
yes.
Um, in college, I realized I have sensory integration issues,
Mm,
and I looked it up and I sent my parents like the full survey that I filled out. I was so
yeah.
excited. I
So you
discovered
were
that.
on your way to getting there.
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
So, like, I'd done so much work already because I was like, because I'd asked my
Yeah.
teacher, who rocks? Because they're
Yeah.
like, somebody with Tourette's will rock in their chair. I was like, who else rocks?
Yeah.
Rocks, like
Who else
sensory
rocks?
integration. That's a sensory
Yeah.
integration. I was like, so I looked it up.
Yes.
Da, da, da.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I wore headphones when I was feeling overwhelmed. I, um, and I started also questioning around the same time because I was at work and um, and my boss would talk over me, would tell me what I thought, like was this very domineering figure. And I found myself unable to speak. And I was like, I've read about this.
Yes.
It might be selective mutism. How
Mm,
interesting. Huh. And and so all of this, so then when it came to a head, I'd already figured out what pieces of it I had. It was just kind of like sewing it up and now it's done. It was like the final serge on the dress that was already made. And so now I was allowing myself to take a nap on the floor at work.
mm,
I was allowing myself to say, I'm not doing this right now. I'm going to take a break. So I was like,
yeah.
instead of pushing through to do the socially acceptable thing, I was looking at that and saying, no, I don't have to do that.
Mm,
And also at work, like advocating for myself, saying, no,
yeah.
this is how my brain works. This is how my mouth works. So
Hmm.
let's create a workaround that works for everyone that allows me to ABC. For this particular organization, that did not work out. And the correct way for me to get ABC was to go somewhere else and start my own thing. But some
Absolutely.
places you can do that and it works. But I was willing to do it even if it didn't work. And I feel like
Mm,
that was like where my healing and the diagnosis kind of met,
hmm. Right.
was that I
Right.
was willing to be weird and just
Yeah.
embrace the fact that I was so strange and also let that mean that I wasn't for everyone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it went hand in hand. And I don't think if I had come to that realization even months before, it would have worked as well. So
Right.
I'm grateful for the timing in that so that both could kind of happen at the same time.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say that you sort of parented yourself and
Oh, yeah.
started advocating for yourself
Mhm.
because you realized that these things weren't things that you could change. And so you
Yeah.
started being the parent that you would have needed in those roles. That is incredible. that's a very cool way for that to play out in your adult life, rather than sort of, closing down and attacking everybody around you for not noticing it before, which is also a very valid option.
Right?
A very valid option. Do you, folks? But that's deciding that you are going to self-parent is also a very awesome way to go. How do you feel about kind of self-regulation now, and sort of how you teach self-regulation to your kids?
It's it's been a serious journey. Self-regulation. Um, so I recently went to an like what series, and one
Mm-hmm.
of the people who spoke said she had two kids with pathological demand avoidance, and what made one of them calm triggered the other one. So
Mm-hmm.
she called it competing needs. And those two words, competing needs, pretty well describes our household
Yes.
all day, every day.
Yes.
So I think I became more conscious, and I tried to do this all the way up to this point, but having that, really rising that autism's genetic. You have two autistic parents, the chances are high that you're going to need the same skill sets that I'm just now learning. So let's start now.
Yes.
Um, and to say out loud, I am asking you to be quiet, not because you're wrong to be loud, but because I need to accomplish something in this room right now, and I need there to be more quiet in this room. If you want to be loud, you can go here, here, here to be loud, or you can wait for a little bit, and then when I'm done, you can be loud again. And just all of these things I had to figure out,
Mhm.
saying it out loud,
Right.
giving that permission. And
Yeah.
then, like my oldest, he has had a lot of responsibility, and I can see a lot in him what I had in myself, where I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, you have problems, that's my fault. I'm like, okay, you are given privileges and trust that some of your other siblings don't get, because you have earned them, because you are trustworthy, because you follow.
Right.
We can trust you to do things
Yeah.
correctly and to be safe. I don't want you to pretend you're fine if you're not
Yes.
fine. I
Right.
want to know first. And like
Right.
every one of them has their own specific needs. I have one that will fly off the handle super fast. And
Mhm.
but he's calm. I
Mhm.
said, would you say what's the hardest thing for you about this thing that ticked you up? Is it
Right.
because you couldn't do it, or because you were embarrassed that you couldn't do it?
Right.
And understanding that it was the embarrassment that was the problem
Of
helps me
course.
decide
How to
how to
parent.
respond.
Mhm.
And instead of, let's try it one more time, see if
Mhm.
we can do it, say,
Yeah.
ooh, that was hard, let's take a break and come back
Yeah.
to it later. And
Yep.
then flip her upside down to do a little pattern reset, because
Yeah.
she's so locked that
Yes.
she can't
Yes.
make herself take a break.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I just, every time I snuggle them, because I didn't, like, snuggles wasn't part of my childhood.
No. Yeah.
Like, just grab them and hold them and
Mhm.
squeeze them. And I just think to myself, like, look at me breaking chains right now.
Yes.
Just
Absolutely.
celebrate that. 'Cause
Absolutely.
I don't always not yell. I don't always not lose
No.
my
Oh my
crap.
God. No. No.
But when it happens, and when we have those moments, and when we connect, I just try to really celebrate that, because it is so hard, and it
It
never
is so
gets
hard.
out.
It is so hard. Absolutely. One of the things that I experience a lot of burnout. I mean, we all experience a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
burnout. So sometimes I will just need to be in my bedroom in the dark with the shades drawn, with my door
Mhm,
shut, underneath a weighted blanket, just sitting there with like my sweatsuit up to my eyebrows and just sitting there. And I
mhm,
don't, so I didn't, my kids will come in and be like, Mama, what's going on? And I'm like, Mama has burnout. Mama has used too many of her spoons. And
mhm,
unfortunately, when we use too many of our spoons, it kind of zaps our brain. And then you have to just sit there and wait for like the spoons to build back up. And there's
mhm,
really only one way to do that, and that is by resting. And then my kids will be like, cool. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want them to be able to use that vocabulary to advocate for themselves in the way that I didn't have it. So I would
mhm,
just deal with burnout, and I would just keep rolling and wait till like some sort of some sort of chaotic thing triggered me into an explosive outburst, right? Because you
Right.
don't know. You don't know. Nobody's teaching you as you're coming up unless you had parents who
Right.
who were like social workers or psychologists. You didn't know. So, and even me who knew that she had ADHD from childhood didn't know because I was surrounded by teachers who thought I just wasn't living up to my potential, which was
Mhm.
surprising given the fact that everybody knew what was going on with me. So, I mean, it was just the thing that we do the most in this house is we work on advocacy, like teaching the language. And then I see my 8-year-old at school sometimes because I volunteer there a ton because I want to give him the opportunity to have a parent nearby who, like, in
Mhm.
case there's a situation, they're like, oh no, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, right? But I'll
Mhm.
see, and they don't always do that. So, school was a weird time for me. Moving on.
Yes. Yes.
School was a weird time for us. So I will see him advocating for himself between his friends, and he'll be like, I am ADHD. This is a problem for me because X. And then all the other kids will be like, what's that? And they'll all come over and they'll be, you know what I mean? And I'm like, this is hilarious. This is unintended but awesome consequences, is what this is. Because then the
Right.
next thing you know, I'm doing that. I do that too. Why do you have a fidget? Should I have a fidget? And you're like, amazing, guys. All y'all are amazing. Let's all do this together.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I feel like I talk about this nonstop, but yet I will have people in my inbox on LinkedIn or any other place being like, Di, I didn't realize until yourself or creators like yourself were talking about this all the time that this is what
Mhm.
was going on for me. So it's exactly the opposite of how kind of my life went, right? So I'm
Mhm.
always so fascinated by how y'all get to the answer and just how it feels to get to the answer and just be like, because I will see people just be like, "Oh no, that's not like, how we can see each other? You know how we can
Mhm.
like, oh, yeah, very nice, Rebecca. I like the fact that you only use small spoons. Yes, indeed, indeed. I get why. Like, um, and you can't just call it out because people have
Mhm.
strong feelings, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'm always fascinated by people that self-reflect at that level that get to that answer, right? Because it's not always the case. A lot of times, people would rather believe that they are bad than that this might be what's going on with them. It's fascinating.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I love having that conversation. What is school like for your kids, and sort of how have you had to advocate for them?
School is fun.
Right?
I have my oldest two have never been a behavior problem. They have both um advocated for themselves and their beliefs,
Mm,
very always very strongly held beliefs in school, which has been depending on the year and the teacher, um more and less well received.
we do that.
Um
We have strong opinions,
so strong.
largely right opinions.
And if you tell it to a teacher,
Oh, yeah.
just because they're older doesn't mean that
No,
that's going to change anything.
no, not at all. Not at all.
um, so yeah, my son, I feel like, invited everyone to a birthday party that we were going to have at the church because they didn't charge. And his teacher, who was atheist, wouldn't let him pass out the invitations because it was at a church. That one
Oh,
was tough. I was like, why does the venue matter?
mm,
This is something he wants to invite people to. It's not.
mm,
Yeah. So that one was tough. I We let that one go, I feel like, cuz um so that but that I feel like he kind of, partly because my son was like, so he believes different than we do, and he
yeah.
kind of gets to make the rules of the classroom. Like, he understood the power dynamic and that was
Right.
why, not because it
Right.
was actually wrong.
Right.
So
Right.
that was fine. My my daughter had an experience where, actually several experiences where it's hard for her to engage with a group. She has
Mm,
opinions. She's fine with being pushed back on, but
yeah.
not being like, your ideas don't get to be the ideas that happen, which
Right.
happens to her surprisingly often. And some teachers will like switch her group up so that
Mm,
it's better and will listen to her. But she had one, it was actually like it wasn't the teacher. It was like a para in the room that happened to be assigned to a child in her group.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you're being bossy, like whatever. And she's coming home. She's like, adults should not talk to children that way. I was like, you sing
Nope.
it, girl. That
Yeah.
is absolutely the truth.
Nah.
And and then later when she brought it up to this person and said, when you did this, I felt this. When you did this, I
Mm-hmm.
felt this.
Good for
She's like,
her.
well, da 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 da. She just kind of like blew it off again. And then she came home again. She said, I feel like an adult should listen when a kid tells them how they're feeling and not, it's not without these words, invalidate what
Mm.
they're saying.
Right.
Like, I'm
Right.
not saying I was perfect and I behaved perfectly. I'm
No.
saying I felt this way. I was like, absolutely. You are
Yes,
right. You are correct.
you
This
are
is how
correct.
it should be.
That is how we talk to each other. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
But
but
it was hard for
also,
her and it took a while to process. And she expected everyone in the next grade to be similarly dismissive and was is surprised every time when they're not. So I'm like, yay, I hope that they continue to be chill and listen and respond to her even if they can't like fix it to at least validate, but it's still a thing that she needs to work through and stuff.
I find that they see our behaviors that are innate to us as defiance. I
Mm-hmm.
find that that is the first instinct that a lot of adults have.
Yeah.
People that potentially maybe have never run into people like us before, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I find that a lot of times authority figures read that as defiance rather than trying to get to a solution, right?
Right.
So a lot of times with my children who are 8 and 6, both neurospicy babies, like my son in particular who's 8, very, very specific. He has thoughts and he is going to share them with you, and
Mm-hmm.
you are going to listen or he's going to keep saying it. That's the only way to get him to stop is by listening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if he thinks that he is right on something, he will die on that hill no matter how small the thing is. Now,
Mm-hmm.
he is not always right because he is not quite at that place yet. But when you get a kid that is neurospicy, that knows more than you do on that subject and knows that you are wrong, that is definitely something that needs
Yes.
acknowledgement in order for the relationship to continue. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, I'm flabbergasted that so little in the schools is still, I mean, I'm not, you know what? I'm not. I say that I am because if it were me, I would have changed that by now. But
Right.
given the state of the schools right now and given the resources that they have, I'm not really surprised that we haven't made it all the way to, education on neurodiversity. Like, to be clear, I am
Mm-hmm.
not trying to, I mean, they're already doing the absolute most with the absolute least. I'm not trying to say they aren't.
Right. Right.
But definitely, in your daughter's situation, the para definitely needed to be accountable to her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, absolutely. Like, she called her bossy. What year are we in? Like, would you like? Oh my god,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
somebody like my daughter who is 6 is absolutely bossy, very sassy, very whatever. If she came home and told me somebody called her bossy, I would be at the school. I would be at the school having a little conversation about the word bossy. Oh my god, there would be a talk in the hall. And the same thing exists with questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, neurospicy people, when we ask questions, I will give you an example. If I say to someone that has just done something in front of me, why did you do it like that? I am hoping to gain more information and insight into why they did it that way so that I
Mm-hmm.
might think about it for myself, decide if it's right for me, and carry forward in my life. However, if a neurotypical person says, why did you do it that way? That is immediately intended to be a slight against you.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that. They don't use questions the same way we use questions. So sometimes people will cop an attitude at me because I did not pick up that I was supposed to be attituded at, right? Like, I don't always do that. Like, sometimes I totally miss that I was supposed to pick up the passive aggressive. I'm terrible at that.
We had a teacher who had a hard time with my daughter, another daughter, reading when she was supposed to be listening and then not knowing what the instructions were so she couldn't complete the assignment. I said, okay, she's not going to be able to just know that it's time to not read. So let's do this. I'll
Yeah.
send her a card. I'll laminate it.
Mhm.
On the front will be, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Then the other side will be, can I read now?
Yeah.
Because without disrupting the class, she can raise her little card and you
Mhm.
can respond to her without interrupting anything. I thought this was great. She thought it was a great idea. We did it.
Yeah.
I got an email back. You need to tell your daughter that she can't raise the "Can I read right now?" question during listening time.
What?
That was the whole point of the
That was the
call.
whole point. That was the
Just
point.
tell her no.
Yeah,
Just say not right
right?
now.
Oh my God.
Listening time.
Literally.
Oh, but she should just know. I was like, ugh.
No.
And then last week I went to an IEP meeting with a friend for her son, and I was I was doing my like I'm a strong presence in the room thing so that I could be
Yeah.
super nice to her. But in
Yeah.
my mind, I'm just exploding. I was like, all of these things that they are accommodating for this child should have been offered to my child
Yes.
in the
Yes.
same school
In the
district.
same school day. Yes. I know. I
Oh,
know. And I get why. I get why. I know that we
I
can't
know.
individually teach every kid, and I am not saying
Yes.
we should, but we should.
We
But
should. Sorry.
I volunteer at the school a ton that my kids are at, and it has become known that I am the neurospicy whisperer. And I think
Ooh.
that they are, I know, fun, right? So I think that they are, every time I go in, I will be paired with one of their neurospicy babies, right? I don't think it's like intentional that they're trying to see if like I can do harder and harder kids, but that's what's happening, right? That's what's happening. So what I'm finding is that I think that people don't realize any of sort of the helping things that we would do for a child with neurodiversity, right? Like I will take a kid and we'll go walk. Like we'll do
Yeah.
a break. Like we'll be walking and talking and I'll be teaching while I'm walking, right? And I'm not saying that everybody can do that,
Mm-hmm.
but I can do that. And
Mm-hmm.
that has definitely helped. And that will put kids over. Another thing I do is timers. I will have kids that would rather, like, they're supposed to be working on their letters, they're drawing instead. Put down a timer. Okay, that's going to be 2 more minutes. And then I carry fidgets with me everywhere. I will trade a child a fidget so that they can get over it. Like, if we're working on an iPad, we got to get rid of the iPad. Ooh, look, Miss Di has a fidget. Like, on and on and on. And I am not saying everybody can do all that. I am
Mm-hmm.
saying that everybody should know, right?
Yeah.
Like we should know what it looks like in our schools. But another thing that I'm finding though is that like we have parents, like I'll look at a teacher and I'll be like, that's autism, right? Like we're talking about autism here when we're seeing this. And they'll be like, oh yeah. And I'm like, well, what are we doing about it? And they're like, oh, well, the parents don't want to hear it. And you're like, what? And like I am shocked that there is still so much stigma attached to ADHD and autism that we would rather, as parents, believe that our child might be dealing with behavioral issues that we can scream their way out of, rather than that it might be autism or ADHD or any other type of neurodiversity that we can support them through in the very old age of 2023. Like I'm shocked we're still in that place, and I think not very nice thoughts about Jenny McCarthy pretty regularly. Like that might be my Roman Empire. I think pretty regularly, would we still be in this situation if this person hadn't decided they were an expert for all of us? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to hate on anybody, but seriously, I think that pretty regularly. Absolutely, absolutely, constantly. Are you out there teaching the teachers too? I think
A
that's
little
like,
bit. A
yeah,
little bit.
right? Absolutely.
So my degree is in early childhood special ed, and then had my first baby right after that. I taught
Mm-hmm.
for almost a school year when I was pregnant with my fourth,
Ooh,
and that
okay.
and that they didn't pay enough for me to go back and
I get why.
with
Yep.
four
No,
kids.
I'm surprised anybody's in there. Like I'm always like, oh God, bless these people. Yeah.
And I wish I could.
Yeah.
It would be
Yes.
amazing, but
Yes.
I
Yes.
cannot.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Yeah.
so um, so yes, I understand. I'm grateful. I'm so grateful because um, I know what an IEP is.
Mm.
I know what a
Mm-hmm.
504 is. I know how the
Yes.
difference. I know you absolutely have to tell me. I know what you can and
Mm-hmm.
cannot do. And if I can't remember or it's changed, I know where to find it.
Yes.
I know who to ask.
Yes. Very lucky because that's not easy. And they are, I don't mean they, look, I don't mean like the overseers, but I mean like they aren't going to tell you. They're not going
No,
to, that's not going to be something that happens. You're not going to
no.
get like a step-by-step guide from anybody for sure.
But
Yep.
we've also done some homeschooling. So most years we've had some in and some out. So,
Mm.
and they have some agency in that if they're like, I
Yeah.
don't want to be homeschooled anymore. I'm like, fine.
Yeah.
And then the little ones get less agency. I
Yeah.
get more of
Obviously.
choosing.
I get why.
But right now, in Michigan, they give homeschoolers the option to do like electives in the school and do the classes out,
Okay. Yeah.
and that's pretty sweet. That's pretty
That's
sweet.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. That's a good way. That's a good middle ground for a lot of families, I bet.
Yeah.
Good. That's fun. Sorry, I don't mean to take us off total topic here. Okay,
Good.
so I would talk to you forever, as we obviously could. Um, so again, you do a lot of cool work in your life. Who are you looking for? Who is your best client?
Who am I looking for? Oh, I feel like my best client would be someone who is very confident in their skin, knows what they, and has been in business for 10-ish years,
Mm-hmm.
7 to 10 years,
Cool.
is really good at that
Mm-hmm.
and is ready to make some changes,
Mm-hmm.
but way too busy because they have so many people who need them
Yes,
to do it by themselves. So
absolutely.
then I can, whether that is a refresh on the brand, whether that's an online course, whether that's a book, whether
Mm,
that's foray into public speaking, consulting, whatever. It's just sit down, figure out what do you want to do
yeah,
next. Like
yeah,
you've nailed where you're at. You
absolutely.
could always shore up something, but you basically nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
Where you want to from here.
Yeah. How do people reach out to you? How do people follow you? How do people follow your work?
Cool. So I am on LinkedIn. I'm getting back into being active.
Mm,
Um, I have I have a portfolio, but I'm moving it. I think the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. I read my
cool.
messages.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to chat with people one on one and learn more about them. And you
Absolutely.
can also get my email that way too.
Cool. I love that. I love, neurospicy people out there supporting other neurospicy people to be more successful in a world that isn't really built for us. That's one of my favorite
Right.
things that we do in this world. Building community, folks. All right. So thank you so much for this conversation. I've had a great time talking to you and getting to know you. And I am sure everybody listening has had a very informative conversation about neurodiversity and parenting and all the things that we have covered today. So thank you so much for being here. Again, I am your host, Di Cerullo. This is the Indomitable podcast where we discuss extremely human stories about being indomitable. And remember, together, we are indomitable. Thanks for listening. Take care.